Hi, my name is Mark Johnson. We're here at Winthrop Shoreline. Pretty quiet right now. 21st. Should be pretty busy with the Constitution. I'm going to be introducing you to a lot of folks that have, or a few folks that have taken part in the restoration of the Constitution and have special interest in it. First, we'll be going with Anita Petricone on a tour of the Constitution, and she'll update us on some of the woodworking that's been done there.
Hi, I'm Anita Petricone, and I'm a ship restorer on the USS Constitution, and right now we're in the bilge of the Constitution, and I'm just going to point out some of the changes that have occurred and some of the projects that we all did when the ship was in dry dock for 3 years. You can see this is the bottom of the boat, the bilge, and you notice these large timbers here. These are called diagonal riders. When the ship was built, Humphreys, the designer, had these installed, and over the years they were removed to gain more space for storage down here, and since then they have found documentation that they were originally installed, so we had them reinstalled. And the whole process, what took place here is they got a gang together to make plywood forms that fit right where these are, and they took the forms out and then sent them off to have them made up out of laminated white oak. And it was quite tricky snaking these in the ship, when they because they are all in one piece and they go right down to the keelson. This boxed-in area has just been added recently just to cover up all the ballast. We have a lot of lead ballast under the alongside the keel here. Well, we can head up to the next deck, and I'll show you some of the changes there. We're back aft now on the berthing deck, and this area here is where all the officers used to. That's where all their quarters were and where they ate. And back here was the pantry, where they stored a lot of their food. If we go back in further, well, actually, if you notice these big timbers here, I just want to point out that these were added to the ship to stiffen her up. And if you take a look inside back aft there, you'll get a good idea what they looked like. So they were all added to stiffen up the transom of the ship. And the big iron bar that you see there, that's the tiller, which is how you turn the rudder. The keel is original, and down below back aft there are some breast hook knees that are still original, but they're not easily accessible to see. Also, probably some of her frame stock or futtocks, some of that might also be original. But now the deck here, I wanted to point out that we also stiffened up the deck by putting in, if you notice this plank here, it's got a jog in it. Well, we put what's called locking strakes, and what these do is they lock in on the deck beam below as well as lock into each other, and that would help. It's like a strap that helps stiffen the deck up. And the same thing was done on the overhead here. You can see this is a deck beam. Well, up above there are also locking strakes that lock down on these beams as well as into each other to stiffen up the deck above as well. We're moving our way forward, but right in this area here you'll also notice these big knees. These are called standard knees, and they also were installed to stiffen the ship up between decks and to the hull. And these other knees that you see here are called hanging knees. These are all, most of these were all in good condition and they didn't get replaced. But you have here, you got your lodging knees, you got your diagonal knees, and you got hanging knees. And these are all part of the ship's structure to stiffen up the hull and the decks. I would also like to point out, to get an idea of how thick the hull is, this here is an airport. That airport is about 24 inches thick. That's right through the side of the hull, and the hull is like 24 inches thick. And on the other side of this ceiling planking here is what's called futtocks, or frame stock. And the frame stock on this ship is solid. There is no spacing between it. So it's almost like a sheet of molded plywood, and except that it's 24 inches thick. So you have the ceiling planking here on the inside, and you got your frame stock running up and down, and then outside you have your hull planking. And the total makes for about 24 inches. If you want, we can head forward and I'll show you some more timbers that we've added to stiffen the ship up. Now we're all the way up forward on the berthing deck here. And as you can see, we've also added these knees to stiffen up the bow, just as was seen back aft. So this is like all new, and in addition to her original construction, to stiffen the ship up. This is the next deck above, and it's called the gun deck. And basically what we did here was more of the same as down below, except we added all these knees. These are all new, and we also reinforced the side of the ship on this level. And what we did was these thick strakes here, these ceiling planks. These were added and through bolted to the outside of the hull, and it's like a girdle that completely goes around the ship. And this was done to stiffen the ship up. And we also added locking strakes here. As you can see the joggles. And this deck here is oak, and but these here lock down again on the deck beam below, and then lock into each other. And the way that these are secured to the deck is they're pinned with large iron pins, and then they're bunged over. This is called a bung, and it's just a wooden plug that covers the end of the nail, or the spike, so that water won't get in there and rust it out. You need to have a whole new bucket. We're still on the gun deck here, and this area is the captain's day cabin, and this is where he held his conferences and did whatever. And right now, if facing aft here, this is where the captain, where he slept. Yeah, people were generally shorter. If you were taller than like 5, well, I'm not sure, but you had to be a certain height to be a sailor. If you were taller, you were a Marine. And this is where the captain slept. And it was pretty cramped, but needless to say, it was enough room, I guess. It was much more accommodating than the other officers. And in here, this area, was the captain's bathroom, and it was called a quarter gallery. And there's one of these on each side of the ship. And the Commodore of the Navy, when he was on board, he would stay on the other side of this area, because there's exactly a mirror set up on the other side of the ship back aft here. This is the view the captain would have sitting on the throne. This is the captain's bed, and it's made out of mahogany, and it's been stained and varnished or whatever finish. I'm not sure what the finish is, but it is Honduras mahogany. This is the spar deck, and right now we're facing aft. And as far as reconstruction that took place here, most of this deck is new. It's fir. And so this has been, most of this has all been replaced here. We also did, on this deck, we also added these thick strakes here, which are also locking strakes, just like on the other decks. And these lock down again on the deck beams and into each other. And the waterways here, this big piece which sets in, that's all new. That's been replaced all the way around the ship as well. Also, that's all been replaced is all the these sheet bits are new, and all the fife rails, and all these on the side here, all the pin rails are new, and they all new belaying pins. And most of this wood that's new that you see that's all varnished here is all made out of live oak. And live oak was indigenous to the Georgia, the Carolinas, the Florida area, and that particular species does not grow anywhere else in the world. And this is the stuff that her frame stock is made out of. And this stuff is so dense that it'll sink if you drop it in the water. And it's very hard wood and durable. So all the pin rails and along the side here, and all these sheet bits and fife rails are all brand new. And that was what was originally used on the ship.
Okay, my name is Rick Robbins. I'm a ship restorer for the USS Constitution, and I'm presently, during this sail training, I'm the main topmast captain. My job is primarily to get the commands from the deck, the mast captain down on the deck. He yells them up to me, and I in turn relay them to the sailors who are out on the yard arms in order to set the sail. Once the sail is set and off we go, the sailors go down below, and we go on our merry way for the sail. The main topsail that I'm responsible for is 1,100 pounds, and it takes probably 16 to 20 people out on the yard arms to furl it up. Yesterday we went out on the sail, as I heard you already were told, and it was very successful. We ended up going, it was almost 7 knots, I think it was, and it was really a sight to behold for the first time in 116 years, I guess it is. And although we were still tethered to the tug behind us, it was almost like a dog on a leash. It was exciting. The ship had a heel to it, and it had a bow wave, and it was just something to see. And we're all anticipating on the 21st of July, when we go for our official sail, when we'll drop the tow and be on. I'm sure everybody on the ship is going to go crazy. But I don't know, description of the sailing process. We go aloft. We all go out on the yard arm and undo what are called gaskets, which are the lines that are used to secure the sail to the yard arm when it's all furled up. So we'll go out there and undo these gaskets and push the sail off the yard arm. And then at a point when everybody has their gaskets all coiled back up again, we yell down to the main deck that we're all set, and the sailors will lay down to the fighting top, which is a platform that you see about halfway up the mast. And at that point, down on the main deck, they will take and haul out on the sheets, which pull the bottom corner of the sail out to the lower yard arm, and now we have the sail fully in a square position. And then what they do is they haul the yard arm that the sail is attached to up, so we fill the sail right up at that point. And then they go through the regular sailing maneuvers, which would be, a port tack or a starboard tack, or wearing the ship, which has the wind from the back. And that, we go along with that. And at some point in time, when the captain determines we've had enough sailing, which I think most of the people on the ship wouldn't have enough at any point, but we have to stop at some time, he in turn sends everybody aloft again, and they lower the yard arm. They clew up the sail, which is to bring the corners that were brought out in the past. They bring them up in, and the sail more or less collapses, loses all its wind, and then all the sailors lay out onto the yard arm again, clip in with their safety harnesses, and we all in unison start hauling up the sail right across. And we try to stay in sync so it comes up in an easy fashion. Once that's all brought up, we wrap the gaskets back around it again so that it's stowed properly, and then we're done, and we lay down to the deck, and we're all set. And that's it. Okay, I've had extensive boat rebuilding on my own, and then I was working down in Plymouth Plantation on the Mayflower 2, involved in a project there where we did a lot of deck beam replacements. We replaced most of the main decking, and then I was a crew on that ship as well when we went out for sails, went over to Provincetown. And the only difference down at Plymouth Plantation is you had to dress up in the period costumes, which in a summer sail is pretty hot because they're all woolen. But it's mostly having a boat building background. The sails themselves were made by Nat Wilson. Some of them, most of them were made by Nat Wilson, who's a sailmaker in Maine. And there was 2 that I know of that were made here by M&R on the 3rd deck where the riggers work. I know the mainsail is 1,100 pounds, and I think the mizzen is 800, and I'm not sure what the fore is, probably somewhere in between because it is size-wise as well. And it's made of a synthetic material that it's called Oceanus, and it's made to look like the original material, but from what I hear, it's half the weight. But it is a synthetic, and when we furl it up, it also has a solar shield on it that the UV panel that's more or less to protect it from the sunlight, but it's less prone to rot, and it should be, a good investment for any future use they do with it as far as longevity of the product.
Hello, I'm Mark Johnson. This is Conrad Fader.
Hello, how you doing?
We're here to talk about what's going on in the Constitution and what will be happening along the shore drive of Winthrop, what we'll see of it there. And mostly we can get a feel for some of the maintenance that's gone on and some of the building that's gone on at the Navy Yard that Conrad has been directly involved with. You are a shipwright?
Yes, that's correct. The Navy calls me a ship restorer.
And there's been, of late, a lot of construction there at the yard. Can you go over some of the little details of some of the things that have gone on as far as the woodworking part of the job?
If you mean within the last 4 years or within the last year? Okay.
Throw the ball wherever it wants to go.
Okay. The ship was originally dry docked, which involved pulling all the spars out, lower masts, and went in for an inspection. And upon inspection, we found out that we needed to do this strengthening package, which involved wood components called diagonal riders, as well as extra knees on the berthing deck. All the knees on the gun deck were replaced. Probably 50% of the knees on the berthing deck were replaced. The diagonal riders, 30% of the planks below the waterline, about probably 50% of the planks above the waterline, 100% of the spar deck, probably a third of the deck beams, all the mast partners, new lower masts, any spars that needed to be replaced. Extra pins through the keel after the hull was x-rayed. Found some pins had been disintegrated, so they replaced some of those pins.
Now those pins that you're talking about, we have a fellow here in Winthrop, Jim Nichols. He did a lot of that work, didn't he?
Yeah, he did all the forge work. All the metal work you see on board is gone through his shop. Basically, it's a blacksmith, and he's worked on all the iron. There's one that went in the news. One of the masts broke during a storm, and the thumb cleat broke, and so they had him build new thumb cleats, larger, stronger ones, and that made it into the news.
Well, we're going to have to get a hold of him later and talk to him about this. Put him on the carpet. Where'd you find all this wood? All this lumber?
Well, we're in the 1990s, so trying to find natural growth wood, large enough dimension for a ship the size of Constitution, we ended up having to go to a laminated wood. And we got it from a place called Sentinel Structures in Bastigi, Wisconsin. And so the ship has entered the modern world, and laminated woods is the way to go now. Every knee, every plank is laminated, and if it's fur, it's pressure treated.
What's all that old tree stumps that we see laying around over there? You just threw that away, or did you use some of that too?
Well, that's live oak. I'm glad you brought that up. That's the one wood that we're still using, natural, because that basically makes up the deck furniture, all the pen rails, fife rails, and that was all made by also another local resident, Anita Petricone, and she did all the deck furniture. All the pen rails where all the pins are put for all the running rigging that was installed, as well as fife rails that also do the same function.
What time are we going to leave to go up to Marblehead that's going to be on that sail? Or is that private?
I don't know if it's private or not, but hey, I'll let the cat out of the bag. I believe we're taking off on the 20th at 0800, and they may change that, it may be earlier, but it probably wouldn't be any later. So 0800 on the 20th.
What time would you estimate that we might be able to see this parade of vessels from Shore Drive?
Probably Shore Drive, probably 1100 hour.
Very good. Then we'll expect to see a lot of folks up on Shore Drive, all getting to know one another and being friendly. I think that will conclude our little get-together this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, we're back at the beach. I have Hazel and David Stewart here to talk a little about the historical part of the trip. Hazel?
Thanks. Well, I had the most wonderful opportunity the other day. We're making a documentary about the Constitution, my husband David and myself, and it's going to be part of our series, A Grain of Sand. And I was blessed enough on July the 8th to be invited by the captain, Commander Richard Beck, to sail on her. And it was the most incredible feeling to be on this ship that beat the British. And then I realized afterwards it was not really about people against each other, but it was values, it was spiritual values that kept the ship going. You know, the children and their pennies that got to collect all these pennies, they had to save her. Before that, Oliver Wendell Holmes, wrote this poem about her, and it's what kept her going, and I thought that was worth a program. I mean, I know everybody else is doing programs, but we're going to do one too. And tomorrow we go down to interview Joe Wilson, who is the deck commander for the day of the sail. Wonderful Afro-American, and he said he's the only one to have reached this position, the only Afro-American to have done that. And that was awesome. Yeah. And then you did stuff, darling, didn't you?
Well, I photographed from land. I didn't go aboard. I wasn't invited. But I went up to Nahant, and I got a few shots of her crossing in front of Graves Light, going out and coming back, and a brief shot as she went by Eastern Point in Nahant. I thought she was going to put up her sails there, but I got misinformed, I guess, because the sails were actually put up off Marblehead, and it was too far to photograph from where I was, and I knew by the time I drove up there and found a place to set up, they'd be gone, so I didn't actually see it under sail.
And on the 20th, I'm renting a plane to do some aerial photography over her when she sails up to Marblehead. And on the 21st, if I say my prayers right, with any luck, I should be on a destroyer behind her, which for me is wonderful because she's going to sail past us, and she's only using the 6 sails because that was what was most maneuverable under battle conditions. That's why she didn't put all the sails up.
You know, whatever happened with the captain? How did you meet him?
Well, I had written to the Commander Marin of Public Affairs, and he said that there would be a slight chance of probably not July the 8th, but most likely the 20th. So I was practicing, I was going down to watch them do sail stations, and they do sail stations every day from 7 until 9 for practice. And I was down there on the dock, and the next thing I know, the public affairs officer came over and said, the captain wishes to invite you on board. So I go swanning with my WCAT camera and my WCAT tripod, and I get on board. And so that was wonderful, and about 20 minutes later, he came over to me again, and he said, the captain wishes to invite you to sail on July the 8th. Oh! And so my face showed everything. And the captain yelled across and he said, your perseverance has paid off. Wasn't that absolutely? But he is a very special man. Richard Beck, he's going on to teach history at Southborough, Massachusetts.
Yes.
And they're going to be so blessed having that man. He really is an exceptional human being. He cares about everybody. He cares about me. I'm nobody. I'm a little person. All these big channels, and British Aerospace was, and he still had time for me with British Aerospace waiting the other day. And that to me is the sign of a great man.
He's a pleasure to work with.
Yeah.
He really is.
I'm sure he is.
Yeah.
I think he's awesome human being. Just like this one.
He's been more than gracious with most everyone.
Yeah.
His subordinates, he's treated very well, and they seem to like him a lot.
Oh, I bet they do. Yeah.
People respond to that, I think, a lot. When
Yeah, I think they do. So, when you were, when we went up to Castle Island, we were up there taping her when she went by and when she turned round. Where were you then?
I was with the Cass and Young, which is a World War II destroyer.
Okay.
And whereas everyone was so busy with Her Majesty, someone had to take care of poor old Cass and Young, and that was my job.
That's wonderful. And where are you going to be on the 21st?
The 21st, I'll be tending the lines for the Constitution, and then I'll come up alongside and provide fire protection for her with our pumps.
Excellent. And then he says it's not important. So how long have you been sailing?
About 55 years.
You don't look old enough.
Well, I started when I was about 3, so...
With a little sailboat on a pond?
Well, helping out on sailboats as a youngster.
Really?
Yeah.
Just as pleasure or work?
Always pleasure.
That's wonderful.
No. It's never work.
No.
Even when you're paid.
Right. Well, we're not paid either, so... It's going to be a great day.
I think so.
Yep.
And we now have Steve Nichols that was jogging by here, and we grabbed him right off the main street. Good morning, Steve.
Hi, good morning, Mark.
We've been discussing you earlier in your part in the Constitution, and I'd also like to mention that Steve is an ex-employee of the National Park Service, too, up there at Saugus Iron Works, where he used to pump the bellows. And
that's correct. That's correct, Mark.
We had mentioned earlier, before you came, that that you had been working on a lot of the fittings on the vessel. I also know that you've done some work on some armament, and I thought maybe you could go over a few of the things that you've done.
Yeah. Yeah, my overall responsibility was for the ironwork on the ship during the overhaul in dry dock, and when she just came out of dock too, there was also more work. And basically, it went from soup to nuts because I did everything, like Mark says. I did some armament, which was not, well, I made some copies that's from 1797 naval cutlasses, and they were used as presentation pieces for who I don't know, and where they went I don't know. But they were copies of what I was told was the issue cutlass on the ship when she was in service, if that's clear. Is that clear enough? Okay.
Very good. One of the things that a lot of people are familiar with, as far as you're concerned, is the banding of the masts.
Oh, yeah.
And this is kind of a scary operation if you watch it. It's I'll let Steve go over just a minute of what goes on when they band the mast.
That's about what it takes, is a minute. Well, basically and briefly, what we did is, after the bands were made, some of the bands I had to make new because some of them were really gone, and some of the older bands were still in good enough condition to repair, so I did that. So whatever the case was, we each band was heated up separately in a kerosene furnace to between about 12 and 1500 Fahrenheit, okay? And what that looks like is, in daylight, it barely looks like it's heated because the heat doesn't show up. But in shade or shadow, it's a dull red bordering on an orange, which is, you have to use your own visions of color to interpret what I'm saying, but, you know, a little bit brighter than a ripe tomato, all right? And at that point, if it was a split band as opposed to a solid band, because there's two types on board Constitution. Some they're all bent into a circular shape. Some are square, but the ones we're talking about for this discussion are circular, and they're joined by a lock, which means they can be opened up. And others are bent also into a circle, but they're welded, and so they can't be opened up. They are whatever diameter they are is what they stay. And so we had two types. And the easiest to put on, although I guess it's all relative, the ones that were split, what happened was, when they were hot, I gave my boss the high sign. He got the guys ready, which means fire hoses, one on each side of each mast, okay? One guy on each hose, or maybe two in case it was, sometimes two in case the hose kicked when they opened the nozzle. And and then we had a crew who was stationed at the station on the mast. So there was a station on the mast, was laid out with nails. So we went up to as far as those nails were and then put the hot band on. That was our reference, okay? And so we had guys there on either side of the mast with a come-along and a clamp band that I made up, and I'll explain how that worked in a minute. And so me and my boss were the ones who took the band out of the fire. I took it out, a pair of tongs. He grabbed one end with a pair of tongs. I grabbed the other, and we pulled it open, just like a big leather belt. Only, well, obviously, you know, it's not as flexible as leather. Even though it's hot, it's still pretty stiff. So you still have to yank it, you know. But it's quite malleable as compared to the cold state. I guess that's the best way to explain it. And anyway, so we walked that right up the mast, one on either side of the mast, with the band physically curving under the mast like this. Here's the mast, here's the band, here's one guy, here's the other guy, and we're walking this together right up to where it has to go. And this all takes place in like a blink. And so what we do is we reach the station that are marked out, as I said before, by nails in the mast. Get right up against the nails and pull real hard up towards each other to snug that band up as tight as we can against the mast. As soon as that happens, you get an instant fire. The mast starts to burn. And so
The exciting part.
immediately you're handicapped because you get flames in your face, you get smoke in your face, and hopefully if there's a nice breeze off the harbor, it's all going one way, hopefully. So as soon as that happens, you got to really work quick. You have to get this clamp band around the hot mass band, get the come along hooked onto the 2 pins that are in this clamp. It works. This clamp band works like an old-fashioned brake band. If you ever seen a winch brake, it works just like a brake band on an old winch. But anyway, so the guy that come along pumps the handle up hard and sucks that band right in against itself and against the mast. And of course, when that happens, it flames even more. What also happens is you get 2 ends that fit together like this. They got a slot through them, and 2 opposing keys go in there. And as soon as those start to come together, each guy grabs one of the keys that are already laid out in place on the mast and the hammers that are already laid out as well, and they drive those keys towards one another like this, or in opposing direction. What that does is that pulls that lock or buckle or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what the name of it is, on the band. It pulls it very tight together, and that basically puts the band in place on the mast where it's going to go. As soon as that happens, we got a hammer and we knock a pin that knocks the come along off, and the guys with the fire hoses go nuts all the way around the band, because by then it's really flaming. And see, you don't need to cool the band off to shrink it. It's going to shrink itself. But if you don't cool it off, it's going to burn the mast up. So it has to be cooled off with water. You know, and that's basically it. And it took me about twice as, maybe almost 3 times as long to explain it as the actual event I just explained would occur. Because you're really moving fast. You have no choice. You have to go as quick as you can and be coordinated as you can and as safe as you can, because you get all kinds of people around you. You know, you get fire hoses, you get flames, you get guys who haven't done a lot of it. So you got, you know, it was really interesting. I got to say that was the most fun job I did there. Oh yeah.
I hope the next time you do this, you invite us to film it.
Oh, there's tapes of this. Oh yeah. Yeah, the Navy has a tape, at least of a couple of the times we did it.
Are these tapes public at all?
I don't know, Mark. I don't know. I imagine if you spoke to somebody up there, you know, you could...
I think we'll look into this and try to let people know if some of these tapes are available. I'm not sure they are. Well, that's a real interesting part of the operation, and it's something that probably needs to be seen to be truly appreciated, but believe me, it's an event. I think that most of the time, all the people on that ship all have unique little jobs that they've done and can tell these stories one after another. The work that's been done there is so extensive that the ship has literally been near rebuilt to the point where you could practically say they could have built a new ship for the work that's been involved here. A great effort, and I'm proud of all of our people at the Navy Yard, and especially our own little group here from Winthrop.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's really been a pleasure working on Constitution, and it's probably been the most interesting thing I've ever done as far as metal work goes. And as far as the sailing goes, well, I'll be in that. And Mark, how about you? What are you going to be doing on Sunday?
Well,
or Monday? Well, both days.
I'm going to be taking the National Park fireboat up there.
What's the reason? What's the reason?
Well, we're going to have the Boston Fire Department and the Coast Guard and several boats going up to Marblehead and accompanying the Constitution. But there is a point when these vessels will be returning to Boston as far as the fire coverage is concerned, and my little vessel will go up beside the Constitution, stand by as a fire boat. We'll be hooking up pumps from our boat to the Constitution into the system which is permanently installed on the vessel. And we'll also act as a fire watch.
Sounds good to me.
Well, I thank you, Steve, and I hope everyone will be up at Shore Drive and get a look at it. We said earlier that we thought that it might be around 11 o'clock, and in discussing it, we now think that probably you better get up there by 10 at least, because it's going to leave at 8 o'clock. It'll be under tow.
More or less.
It should be about 6-7 knots under tow, so she should be visible by no later than 10 o'clock, I would think. And thank you. Have a good weekend. We hope to see you all there.